Hi everyone. Hi, good evening. Good afternoon for the folks on Zoom. Sorry for all the disturbances. I can see some familiar faces, some new faces, but it's good to have new faces all the time. Thank you for joining us. I know there are so many amazing events going out there. It's that week of the year, but we are glad that you chose to spend this time with us. Well, my name is Neharika. I co-lead the NYC chapter of CMU Tech and Entrepreneurship here, along with Rachel and Steven as president. And of course, like he will be introducing the stars of the show. But before we get started, yeah, you can come in, come in. Before we get started, just a quick show of hands. How many tartans in the house tonight? Oh, wow. That's a good mix. That's nice. Well, thank you for joining us, but special welcome to the non-CMU folks. This is something we are trying for the first time. I hope first of many. We would love to know your feedback in the end, so please feel free to reach out to me, Rachel, or Steven. How many of you are aware of CMU Tech and Entrepreneurship community? Wow, okay, thank God. It seems like my performance evaluation. This was my KPI. How did I do? Well, thank you so much for being our platinum members. But for the folks who are not aware of the community, I'll just give a quick intro. Just bear with me. So we are trying to build an ecosystem for both alumni and students. We are trying to help them with resources, networking events, mentorship sessions, pitch events, and just basically trying to develop a community, a sense of community, so that everybody gets something out of it, be it a founder, an investor, or a service provider, or even a student. And in the US, we have 4 chapters. One recently joined. So we have one chapter in here in the NYC, the best one. We have another in Bay Area, one in Pittsburgh, and recently one in Boston. This is what we're trying to do. I think this was the quickest intro ever in the history of introductions. Well, I think I'm done. Over to you, Steven.
Well, thank you very much. I know Tech Week is the whole of this week, and we're the second day. I know there's hundreds of events, so thank you for coming here. I know part of what drew you here is the CMU love, CMU affiliation. Like, what's CMU doing? We have great 4 alumni. I'm proud to kind of bring them together, showcase what we have going on here. I also want to give a quick shout out to this space. So we are in Wall Street Plaza. We are actually hosted by the Masters of Science in Computational Finance. It's a branch of Tepper. We are glad to have them host us in this space and want to make sure that we give them a shout out because we have an outpost in New York City from CMU that not many people know. Well, if you're on this call, now you know. So I want to do a really quick intro to each of the speakers, just a very brief kind of snippet of who they are, and of course they can expand upon that moving forward. So Arman, who's sitting right there, second to left. Arman is the founder of Parthean, focused on personal finance education for young professionals. So any MCSF people, please go talk to him. In his current role, he is using Transformers to make money easier for people. He's raised over $2.8 million, hired a small team, and he does more in his role and experience. Before this, he studied electrical and computer engineering at CMU, started 2 other startups. He also taught at CMU and worked with Google. Make sure to follow Parthean afterwards. So
Download the app in the App Store.
Jeremy is the founder and CEO of AugX Labs and is passionate about the intersection of media and technology. His startup makes Augie, an AI assistant that seamlessly blends user-owned content, stock media, and AI effects to automatically craft captivating marketing videos. We're going to talk about CMU getting some help with Augie. Jeremy's career spans over 25 years in the field with recent VP experiences at Warner Media, Join, and CBS Interactive, as well as startups such as Sling Media and Digit. He graduated in '96, studying business and economics. Zhou is an associate professor at the Computer Science Department in Columbia University. She is also a co-founder of Articulate AI, which centers its efforts on harnessing the power of conversational and generative AI to empower and shape the future landscape of the workspace. She was featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 in Science in 2018. Her team also won the 2018 Amazon Alexa Social Bot competition. Her team's work on persuasive dialogue systems also won the ACL 2019 Best Paper nomination. She graduated 2017, PhD in computer science. Arman graduated in 19, so want to make sure that known. Last but not least, Phil. Phil is the co-founder and managing partner of Ardent Venture Partners, an early-stage venture fund investing in B2B, fintech, marketplaces, and vertical SaaS. Throughout his 15-year career, he has led 16 investments totaling over $100 million, with prior roles as founder, managing member of Summer League Ventures, and general partner at Novak Biddle Venture Partners. He graduated in '92 in computer science. And he's also done a lot of other stuff. I only did a very brief snippet of all the kind of venture firms and other experience he has. Alrighty, shall we get to it? So again, you're here for the AI investment landscape insights from the builders, the dreamers, and the decision makers, as we've defined as people who are actively building AI-powered startups, someone who actually has a dual role, building their own startup, but really also leading the forefront of innovating as an academic researcher, as well as decision maker, investor in this space. So I'm going to actually kick it off to Arman and Jeremy. If you can briefly tell us, what is the story of your startup and what was your start?
You want to go first? You're alphabetically.
All right, let's do it. So thanks everybody for coming and for tuning in to the Zoom. Our story is basically pretty simple. Money exists in this world in some form of value exchange through something like money will always exist. The personal management of that money has always been difficult since the inception of it, right? It's led to inequality and just personal strife, right? Managing money is hard. Historically, the richest people in the world have had people to help them with that struggle, and the rest of us haven't. We believe that specialization of human management is moving upstream. So the wealthiest people will still have humans, but the rest of us can be facilitated and can have our financial management facilitated by technology like this newest wave of AI. So we basically build systems to help people automate their finances. I've spoken a lot about wealth management so far, but like wealth management looks different for the 99%. So we also have to reimagine what it looks like to help someone with their money, focusing more on cash flows and debt repayment than cold hard investing, right? So in a nutshell, that's what we do. I mentioned earlier we have an app on the App Store, so we are an app, we're consumer facing, but we do work pretty aggressively with not only LLMs, but also other forms of machine learning and AI. So excited to talk about that.
My company makes a product called Augie. Augie is a video editing suite designed for all of you. I say that without knowing anything about what all of you do. Most video editing tools fall into one of two categories: personal branding, iMovie, CapCut, etc. Great products, really, really good if I want to tell my story. At the other end of the spectrum, we have things like Final Cut Pro, Premiere, Avid, and others. Really good if you're Christopher Nolan. Not so good if you're just trying to make, say, an ad on TikTok for your business, which is going to be gone 48 hours from now because that's how fast the algorithms are working. If you don't know this, there's approximately 34 million videos uploaded to TikTok alone every day. And 70% of businesses make no videos to promote themselves. And that's consumer-facing businesses. That's everything from small, medium, all the way up to large enterprise. So Augie uses a variety of AIs. We ourselves don't have our own LLM. We're building at the application layer of AI, but we use probably, I think it's 7 different models inside the product, which I'll talk about as we go. But basically, we're here to try to unlock video marketing for individuals, for small businesses, and as well as every single overtasked marketing team on the planet. So that's Augie.
Thank you. All right, we'll keep it going. So Joe, can you tell us a bit about your research and why is it significant in the knowledge base of AI technologies?
Yeah, so my research is mostly centered on conversational AI and AI agents. So these days, we all know there is large language models, but they're also very expensive. And it also has a lot of latency if you call it multiple times. If you want to build a workflow, you have to call these large language models multiple times, and it's very slow and also very costly. A lot of people think, oh, AI is going to be cheaper compared to human, but a lot of times if you need to come multiple times in order to achieve certain tasks, you're not cheaper, you're also very slow. So I mostly work on building smaller models that can achieve similar performance of large models in all these kind of AI plannings, AI generations, more focused on specific verticals so that you don't have to say, oh, I just, no matter what I do, I need the largest model. But if you wanted to tune into smaller verticals, that you have more targeted data and use cases, you can build smaller models that achieve even better results and also more secure. You can host it yourself. You can do it multiple times, which is faster, but also give you better performance.
Thank you. And would you also like to share a little about Articulate AI and kind of how it relates to what you've been researching?
Yeah, so Articulate is basically the commercialization of my research. So we build specific AI agents that does more of the planning, separating the task, calling different tools in order to complete workflows. So it's a horizontal framework, a developer tool and infrastructure that helps engineers, developers to build their own AI agents that they can deploy themselves.
Thank you. Phil, what is the thesis of Art of Ventures? What drives what you do there and why you created Art of Ventures?
Sure. So when you look at my time in venture capital, I've always looked for changes in infrastructure, made bets against that, and then followed it to the application tier. And so when I started, it was sort of the move from on-prem to cloud, and so that sort of led to the SaaS industry. And the reason I do that is because when you're looking to back category leaders, you want to be there at the inception of a category. And changes in infrastructure often lead to new categories. And so when we started this fund, the two big changes that we noticed were, first, infrastructure was verticalizing. And so we spent a lot of time around what we call embedded financial services, which is API enabling payments, lending, wealth, tax, things like that. And then AI, initially predictive AI, and generative AI when it came out. And so we made a number of bets at the infrastructure layer, and then we backed application companies that leverage those APIs. And I'd say when we started, 80% of what we were doing was embedded financial services and 20% was AI. And now that's flipped, where 80% of the deals that we do now on the AI side and 20% are on the embedded financial services side.
So kind of to that point that you flipped, 80% is now focused on AI services.
Yeah.
How do you, there's so much going on in this space, as I'm sure everyone here knows.
Sure.
What is real and what's just hype? And from your perspective, and I love actually everyone's perspective from your lens of, what have you found is real and what is actually just hype?
Yeah, and so, when I look at it, I bring a traditional enterprise software lens. And you think about, what does enterprise software do, specifically at the application tier? It automates a business process leveraging data, right? And historically, all of that data has been structured, which is 20% of the data in the enterprise. And now, for the first time with LLMs, you now have the opportunity for software to understand unstructured data. And so, as an enterprise software investor, that opens up a tremendous amount of opportunity to create new application workflows on top of a new data source, being unstructured data. And so we see massive opportunity there. It is early days, but when you sort of look at that opportunity, you have the opportunity to first help enterprises leverage unstructured data at the infrastructure layer. We have a number of application companies that will be built on top of this unstructured data. And you can sort of segment those two, right? Because you have the input into applications, and so whereas before that input had to be structured data, right? It had to be either a button click or it had to be something that you put into a field. Now, that's all can be unstructured, so it can be voice, it can be video, it can be an image, it can be a PDF that the application can then pull structure from and push into the application. The application logic can now sit on top of unstructured data, creating huge opportunity there. And then the output can now be unstructured. It doesn't necessarily need to be just structured output. It can be natural language, video, audio, whatever you're looking to do. And so for us, that leads to a dramatic disruption of the core application And so we, over time, see disruption in almost every category of enterprise software. And so, as you look at it from our seat over the next 20, 30, 40 years, we think we can play this trend.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the way that I think about it is very, very similar. I think for the first time we have this technology that I describe as warm-blooded. If you look around this room, we're all exactly the machine that Phil just described, right? We sit on top of unstructured data in our brains. We can look at unstructured data, we can make sense of it, and we can interact with each other in unstructured ways, right? What's interesting about this technology wave, I think, is that we can actually intuitively understand what might come of it, because sci-fi has looked forward to this for many, many years, right? We understand how humans behave pretty well. And so anytime a new product is announced, it's very rare that people are like, oh wow, that's like, I would have never thought of that application. No, it's just another piece of hardware that is the same assistant that we saw in Star Trek, right? And so a lot of these things are not, like, to answer your question about, like, more specifically about, like, what is real and what is fake, I think it's all going to be real because we have imagined these things and now technology is finally catching up to the imagination. I think, though, that we're seeing the free market play out really in an interesting way. Like MKBHD put out this review of Rabbit where he was like, this interesting thing's happening where before you would build a product and then you would release it and then you would sell it and then people would give you feedback. Now you release a product, you accept money for it, and then you give it to people and they hate it, but you've already made so much money, right? Like it's like this backwards flow of money from customer to company. I feel as if we're on the back end of that. I think that the hype from this, from the consumer's perspective, too many consumers have been burned. Too many consumers have gotten a piece of hardware delivered to them or a piece of software delivered to them that does not meet the promise that has been made. So a lot of that stuff is fake, but I think it will be true. Somebody will build an AI piece of hardware that people will wear on them or hold in their hands and they can speak to.
Sorry, what?
What's that?
I wasn't sure what you were saying.
One day, in
That'll take a while.
in the wholeness of time,
next
this
year.
will exist, right?
I'll give you a year.
You think 1 year?
Next year, WWDC, I'll predict Apple puts out some new thing.
And we'll debate about who's gonna do it.
Our
but I
June
think-
4th, 2024.
This
is the date.
Might do it first. but they'll
Apple
be the
might
ones
pay
doing it.
OpenAI to do it, but someone's gonna do it for sure. But yeah, I think just like people need to go back to testing the things that they buy. I think that's kind of where it is. But I think all these things will happen in the fullness of time.
I'm going to go on the edgy because I like having fun on panels. I think the thing that is hyped.
It's all bullshit.
I would say AI startups are hyped and overhyped and probably don't really exist.
Keep it down.
What I mean by that is this. One of the three of us described our company as an AI startup. You're
Yeah.
providing financial services, you're building agents for developers to improve their coding. We have a video solution for business people.
Yeah.
These are real problems that exist today and are not being solved by real products today. AI to find a better meal is simply Yelp with AI. AI to do better dating is Tinder or Match or whatever with AI. AI to do better real estate is when Zillow adds AI. So I don't think there's a ton of opportunity in standalone duplicate AI products. I think I started saying this basically about a year and a half ago that AI got commoditized about 3 months after OpenAI launched ChatGPT. As of about that time, anyone and anywhere could just start adding AI to their thing pretty easily. It's not hard to add AI search to Yelp, right? So to me, the overhyped thing is thinking that someone can go after an existing market that has solved problems and just go after with AI. So I think that's all hype. I also think most of the LLMs that have raised billions of dollars are not going to go anywhere. A little negative on that, but I do think that small models and proprietary models and company-owned proprietary data sets, proprietary generators, et cetera, is the huge opportunity that is being semi-overlooked by a lot. Like everybody's on the OpenAI backbone right now, and we're all sort of riding that, and everybody's dying to get off it, right? OpenAI is, and by the way, we're partners with them, we love the company, et cetera, but it's a bit of a tricky situation they're in, and the more they develop ChatGPT as a product, the more everybody starts, well, wait, are we friends? Or, it's an interesting moment. So my prediction is that we're gonna see a lot of death in the AI startup field, unfortunately. I don't wish anyone poorly, I just go build something that's solving a new problem, not an old problem with AI. And that too, I think we're gonna end up seeing a lot of movement away from huge platforms onto more proprietary and specialized models over the next 24 months. Those are it's my hot take.
Thank you. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, Jeremy, in terms of the needs are still the need, they don't change. It's really about what are the new approach that we address these needs, or how can we address in terms of, before it's like we're paying, right now we can address 70% of them. And then the problem is always gonna be there, but it's really about if there inflection that we can address enough of the pain that people feel a difference. And then AI would be a good way to resolve this in a cheaper and scalable way. So they always have, when I say it has to be cheaper, right? If it, for example, is it replacing humans, right, and doing menial jobs? So, for example, what we do is like you're building AI agents to automate certain things, so that no human has to go through all the process more standardized for companies, right? And then really coming down to it's this sort of productivity tool, really delivering what it was promised, and how much, like in terms of ROI, it's really bringing to the company. Over time, I think there are a lot of startups out there doing different things, which I think is a great thing, and in some ways that people are trying to figure out exactly what happens. But of course, like it's always in terms of the percentages. Many will fail, many will survive, and they will figure out like exactly what is a go-to-market, what is the exact product. But it's really exciting to see how things would change. So I've been working in AI for 15 years. I did my PhD in, my PhD thesis in 2017 is situated interactive intelligent agents, right? So that has been there for a long time. I've seen like always like a different falls, and the hyper is going higher and higher. I'm pretty happy to see that, because like I was like, when I worked on that, it was before Siri. I've just spent so many hours to explain to people what is natural language processing. So now it's like everybody knows, everybody is interested, and I don't have to explain to my parents what I do. It's like, oh, okay, you do this and that. So it's a great way to educate people that how to harness AI. But in the end of the day, when we started doing AI, everybody is really interested about automation. It's really about automation. It's about like reducing the human involvement in terms of automation. So we really do see this as every time, like every 5 years, we say, oh, there's an inflection on AI. But we are delivering like products closer in terms of the real value. So I do see like maybe in the 5 years, more people would be figuring out exactly what the product would look like.
Okay. So kind of touching on what was been said already with Arman saying everything's gonna be built in the future at some point. Jeremy saying like you gotta focus on like actually building something of value. So for the three of you building something, how do you stay ahead when the pace of innovation is just so rapid? Like what do you do about that, and what differentiates you? I know like I think pieces of the answers were shared, but can you recap that in response to like this specific question? Like how do you stay ahead with what you're doing?
Develop as a direction.
Yeah, might as well.
Sure. For me, it's pretty simple because I do research. A lot of the time, like my company is half research, half engineering. It's really coming down to we can't compete with OpenAI in terms of computational power. So what we do is really using the real AI, which is the algorithm, the machine learning, to be able to deliver similar products with similar performance, with less compute, with less data. So this is always about a good machine learning model only sort of compares. Like I need 10% of the data that model trained. I need only 10% of the computational power that model was trained, and I can deliver similar performance or even better performance. So the goal never changes in terms of algorithm. Is you want a faster model, you want a model performs better, you want a model is cheaper. So these things never change in any product. So what we do is really revolutionize in terms of the machine learning algorithms, going into different types of transformer, different type of reinforcement learning. algorithms in order to bridge the lack of data, bridge the lack of compute, bridge the lack of like speed?
For us, our method of staying very current and trying to be as ahead as we can, it really comes down to having, again, I think every company's different in this, so this is not necessarily a roadmap or a recipe, but for us, it's having a very, very clear and articulated vision of what problem we're trying to solve, right? Again, it sort of goes back to most of my way of thinking. You know, I'm a product guy by nature, so everything's a nail or a hammer, period, right? So I look at it, people have the problem of needing to market themselves using video. So how can we solve for that problem? When the technologies come, we instantly assess where does that fit. So as an example, we started the company in January 2022. When ChatGPT launched in October, we instantly looked at like, okay, what does this do for us, right? Like, obviously, well, now we can put a chat interface, which is neat, but for us, more importantly, it became, well, we can probably improve some of our matching algorithms. I won't go into the details. But we can also do a neat thing, which is, hey, you guys haven't made marketing videos before. This thing's really good at writing. We can write scripts for you now, right? A few months later, a company called 11 Labs launched. They do AI voices. We had never thought about an AI voice in the product. I will tell you, there was not one moment where I had the vision of building a product with AI voices in it. And all of a sudden, the startup launched. It was like, oh, people don't necessarily want everything in their own voice, right? Some people are very camera shy. Some people are phonetically shy. Some, all that kind of stuff. Not everybody wants to represent themselves in a certain way. So AI voices will help people get their message out better. So for us, it's been a matter of, we still know exactly where, I use this analogy a lot, where we're sailing the ship. The winds blow, and so it shifts you around. And for us, it's been looking at how each new bit of technology that comes out there becomes opportunistic for us. Interestingly, because we know sort of what the final product must do at a minimal set level, we're looking at how the technology just feeds us to get there too. So I personally I'm very aware of my competition. I spend very little time going too much into the weeds with it because we have a vision, we know where we need to go, and we've market tested that, for 2 years, right? So everything kind of stays with the thesis. And I think the only thing I'd say is be always questioning and validating your own thesis all the time, right? That's how you know you're on track to something. If all of a sudden something changes in the landscape and your thesis becomes a little weaker, you might need to change what your startup does a little bit, right? And so that's sort of our mindset. So should something emerge that would say, okay, well, maybe we have to now sail to a different island, or we're gonna have to avoid this big maelstrom or whatever, we'll deal with that as it comes to it. But it's not, it's almost like having blinders on, like all this other cool stuff that's happening, like I might wanna play with it, but I know how to quickly say, oh, that's not important for us, we'll just push that on the side.
Yeah, I think a few things are true at the same time. First of all, fundamentals are the most important thing, right? Like,
Fundamentally.
Fundamental. I think it's quite simple to get really rich in a free market economy. You need to do something better and cheaper than anyone else, and then find people who are willing to give you money in exchange for that thing, right? That's basically what this economy comes down to. That has not changed because we have LLMs, right? And so I think sticking to that fundamental of just like we've all kind of talked about this, like just building a product that people want, whether or not it's using this new AI technology, I think that has not changed. And I think a lot of people we saw in the previous crazy wave of crypto, people seem to have forgotten about that. They like we were not doing anything better or cheaper. We were selling pictures of rocks, and people got really excited about that. And I think this time around, there is a healthy bit of fear about this previous wave that we're bringing into this, and we just need to continue to stick to the fundamentals of just building good products and building good companies. The second thing I think is just looking ahead. So does anyone here surf? Okay, so when you're sitting on a surfboard and you want to catch a wave, if you're looking at the wave that's closest to you and trying to catch that wave, you're gonna get toppled every single time because you're never gonna be ready for it, right? When you are surfing, you're supposed to sit on the wave, you're supposed to turn a little bit around, look really far into the horizon and see waves coming from a distance so that you're ready for them and you can start paddling out at the right time and then time it perfectly for that wave, right? I think that's really important. And a lot of people, to Jeremy's point, like, this is the next thing I'm gonna say, is like, you have to keep your pulse on the technology because new technology is coming out every day. And so that's important to do. But if you're being distracted by every new thing, then OpenAI is just going to topple you with every one of their new releases. Google now is also back in the race. They're going to start toppling you. And so just making sure that what you're doing will make sense. Sam Altman said this, even if their models get 1,000 times better, if what you're doing still makes sense, I think that's a good place to be in. And then the third thing I was going to say is exactly what you said. Like, there is new technology coming out every day. And if you were in 99 and you weren't thinking about the internet, you're going to miss something, right? And I think that's the same case right now. Like, I think because we're on the tail end of this crypto thing, everybody's like, ooh, like, we're in a bubble. You shouldn't be in a bubble. And it's like, there's actual value here. And I think those who overlook it are perhaps being too negative, you know? And so I think having that healthy dose of optimism and perhaps some pessimism about hype is good. But you need to have both. And I think that's missing with some people. No one here, though, because we're all here to talk about AI. So it's everyone outside. Yeah.
Thank you. Phil, kind of from the other angle, I know you have a specific thesis. You make big bets on a small volume of companies that you invest in. What gives you the confidence to invest in them? Kind of, I guess, in response to these few companies, like how they're staying ahead by doing that. Like, how do you give the confidence that you know that the one you're making bets in are going to make it out all right?
Sure. So I'd say a few things. You know, one, my partner and I have been doing this a long time. I've been a part of, $4 billion companies that I've invested in. Our CEO partners, we have 4 of them. Each of them have built billion-dollar companies, and my partner has built 6. And so we have a lot of experience on the team. We go very deep on the sectors that we invest in, and so we invest in the generative AI category. But before we did it, we met with 300 founders. We reviewed 3,000 companies over the course of 18 months before we made our first investment. And so we had a pretty good sense of the landscape prior to writing our first check. And then, one of the things we try to do is have a concentrated portfolio so that we can provide a lot of support to our companies when we invest. And so a lot of folks focus on the selection piece, but what we've found is that first 12 to 18 months is critically important to the success of that business. And so we put a partner on it, we put our CEO partner on it, and together, we bring a lot of experience to bear in that first sort of entry time to help refer customers, to help in terms of product market fit. And so all of those things sort of coalesce to add value for the companies that we back.
So do your homework, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Do your homework. The exams, the tests are out there. So on the flip side, in just your experience hearing pitches, or just like meeting with these startups, what have you found are some red flags for you, or what are the most common red flags of like, I don't know about that?
It's interesting. So I'd frame it this way, not necessarily in terms of red flags, but just knowing how ruthless the market is that you're going into. And so, not every company is a venture-backed company, and specifically in this environment. And so, we've had this time over the last few years where we've gone from a low interest rate environment where there was just a ton of capital going after a ton of opportunities to a higher interest environment where everything has sort of started to slow down. And so the bar for getting from seed to Series A to Series B has gone up quite significantly. And most folks don't quite fully appreciate that. And so, in terms of the companies we back at the inception stage, so let's say, pre-revenue, early product market fit, what we look for is first a founder who's world-class. And so it's really important to appreciate what world-class is. And it's not just world-class, but it's world-class in terms of what they're trying to do. And so we often talk about founder market fit. So it's not just, hey, you're exceptional at what you're doing, but you're exceptional at what you're doing and what you are like best in the world at is a key success factor in what you're trying to do right now? And then we spend a lot of time on the market. But what I would say is, people always say, oh, going after these massive markets. But the secret with VC is that, the most interesting markets are very hard to size at the earliest stage because you're at the creation of the market. And so, most markets, like what was the market for Airbnb when it started? No one knew, right? What was the market for Uber? Most people sized it based on the taxi market, not the car market. And so the most interesting markets are often very, very difficult to size. And so what we try to do is take an empathetic view of the market. What I mean by that is we look at the market from the founder's eyes. So if you believe what this person is saying, how big is the market? Often that gives you a window into how large that market might be. So if you were talking to Chetsky when he was founding Airbnb, he thought he was competing against all the hotel companies that were out there. So you have to sort of look at the market from his eyes to fully appreciate how big a market is.
Okay. Yeah, kind of what Arman was saying about you have to be cautiously optimistic, but also realistic about what are they seeing? How do you leverage all these different perspectives and then kind of define for yourself what is actually fundamental truth? Okay, very cool. So again, to the founders here who have fundraised in this environment, which has been very difficult, what has been most challenging? What got you through it? What kept you here?
The what kept you here question is interesting. I think if that's a difficult question to answer, then being a founder is probably not the right place to be. Being a founder is very, very difficult, and I think like speaking of Carnegie Mellon, for example, I started my first company when I was a freshman at CMU. This was 2016. At that time, people looked at me like I was ill. Like they were like, "What the hell are you doing? Like you're not doing an internship." Like everyone, it was like this weird thing. And now everybody has a startup. I think in some ways that's really good, but I think in other ways, to your point, I think the reality really needs to be seen as well. It is very, very difficult. And so to answer that question, I think in order to do this, you have to be nuts, and not only nuts, but you have to love and not even love. You just need to. Doing this needs to be the only option.
Yes.
Right.
That is 100% correct.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not even love. It's just
no, because I don't love it all the time, right? Like that's the thing. Like
It is brutal.
it's like
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah. And
it's like being a baseball pitcher. Like your job is to pitch the ball.
Yeah.
That's what if you don't like pitching the ball, don't be a baseball pitcher.
Yeah, and like there's so many there are too many professional athletes who have said the same thing, and you're like, oh yeah, but you live like an awesome life, and it's like we don't live an awesome life. You know what I mean? Like it's really not cool to do. So to answer that question, it's just another bump in the road, honestly. And this is the only reason, this is the only thing that we can do. So what were the other two questions?
It was my fault for
No, all good.
meshing them.
No.
It's in this fundraising environment.
Oh yeah, I'll
what are
answer
the
that more
challenges that you
tactically.
be able to navigate?
Building an actual business matters again, right? So I raised my first dollars right before and at peak ZERP. And at that time, I was really bad at fundraising. And fundraising is a skill that you have to learn. And I think that's another thing that people don't realize. You can't just every person that you see who's raised money of us, we're those people. We all had to learn how to raise money. You had to learn how to raise money from LPs, right? It's a skill. So I was really bad at it, even at peak ZERP. So it was really hard at that time. It was awful. And then, right at the peak of ZERP, I was like, oh, cool, I got the hang of it. And then we all got smashed, right? So then I was like, okay, now I need to learn how to raise money in this environment. And it is really just, you just need to, there's no hype. If you walk into a meeting and you talk you try and be Elon Musk or you try and be Steve Jobs and you try and paint this big picture of what the world's going to look like, people like Phil are going to laugh you out of the room. You have to understand what business you're building on top of how it's going to change the world, but not just for the sake of changing the world, but for the sake of building a really big market to, again, get back to the business fundamentals, right? It really is just back to the simple basics of business building. And again, that is a skill that needs to be learned, which we all had to learn again, And there's second order effects of that, which is like instilling those values into your team and instilling like telling your investors that this environment has changed, because not all investors are there either, right? So it's not just getting yourself on board, it's bringing everyone else along for the ride as well. Reorienting the ship. There's a lot to it, but and it's getting more and more aggressive too. But yeah, those are some things.
I have nothing to argue with on that, so +1 to all those comments. I'll share. I think you want me to share my little story.
Go ahead.
Um,
I'm excited.
So if you really want to understand what Arman's saying about like how you have to be doing this and how there is no other option. When I started this company, it was January 2022, right as the venture market was about to collapse. Nobody had told me that. Let me be very clear. And I'm not a spring chicken, so I know how cycles work. But we didn't expect, a world war starting in the midst of doing our little startup. So that happened right while I was doing my pre-seed round. First bit of advice I will give to everybody: if you are fundraising, and to Arman's point, it is a skill and you must spend time on it, and I recommend getting nurtured and mentored on it because it does not come naturally. It is unlike most other things. It is unlike running a company. They are two very, very different things. But always have whatever you need for fundraising in your hands when you call someone for money. I lost probably $250,000 just because I didn't have the Safe Note fully in DocuSign format, and in a 4-day span, the world changed enough for about $250,000 to say, I'm really sorry, I'm not investing anymore. 4 days, okay? So never ever call for money if you cannot immediately follow up with a DocuSign. First statement. Things went fine. We raised our pre-seed round. And then the fall of 2022, we went out to raise our seed round. And we were doing very well. The vision was great. People loved the platform at the time. We were starting to see all the growth we wanted. And I had met a VC who was getting really excited about what we were doing. Got a call on a Friday night. Going to put you into partner meeting on Monday. This is a formality. Can you give us access to the data room this weekend? We're ready to go. Yes, yes, and yes, because by now I had learned the previous lesson. So data room was ready, documents were ready, off they went. The following week, a little product launch called ChatGPT. 48 hours later, I got a direct phone call from the guy, no text, no email, no scheduling, no Calendly. Hey, Jeremy, we're really sorry, all bets are off. All bets are off. They shut down every single investment they had active, including, we didn't have the actual term sheet yet, but disappeared. One thing that you may or may not have heard about fundraising is that so much of it is momentum based. So when you reach sort of an end of a road and then all of a sudden that road just becomes a dead end, you don't get to you can't go back to the last exit and be like, well, I'll go this way instead. You've already, we'd already gone too far. So we started over. January of 23 now.
Starting over is even harder than starting the first time.
Yeah. By the way, you only fundraise in September and January, just so we're all clear. Talk about that another time. So start over again, January 2023. Things were going well. Come early March, we were getting a term sheet the following week. That was on a Tuesday. On a Thursday, anyone remember what happened in March of 2023? On a Thursday morning, a little bank went belly up. Phone call Friday night, no term sheets. Call you back in 12 weeks. We did close the round. I started the fundraise for the third time in June of 23. We got a term sheet in June. We got our first anchor tenant. We finished the whole round by August. It's beyond perseverance is what I'm saying here. And it's not to say that any of us are so great. It's just a thing that we do. And so if hearing my story or any of the other stories, because I'm sure everybody hears some heartache, if that's I don't ever want to do that, don't be the fundraising founder of a startup. You can have any other role there. Absolutely, be part of a startup. But that's the kind of thing you're going to have to deal with. And if that was enough to knock me out, then I should just go back to my cushy job at Warner Media, right? But I didn't really want that. I wanted to do this. And so we made it through. We ran out of money for a little while. We did all sorts of crazy things to try to make things work. We built a game and licensed it and made some money off that. Like, we did what it took to keep the company going. And I will say, I know it'll come up later, but I will say a absolute causal moment in our fundraise was getting accepted into the Carnegie Mellon Venture Bridge program, which I love speaking positively about. They already paid me to do so. So, here we are.
Yeah, so I started the company with a grant from the government, a National Science Foundation. Really, it's because we're technology first. Because I'm a professor, I work with National Science Foundation a lot. This is a special program for commercialization. So we took the grant, so it's not equity dilutable, and we started building. So we got pretty good tractions because we're technology. It's really relatively easy to get traction because you just need to show people who are similar to you that this is a product they want as well. So for me, we just started fundraising actually two weeks ago. It is a very competitive market. It's a lot of noise in terms of AI agents in general. But I haven't gone through the full cycle, but it would be great to, Jeremy knows much more than I do.
Not about most things.
Well, Joe, thank you three for your thoughts. And then Joe, this question is actually for you. As a researcher, what are some of the medium to long-term innovations that gets you excited? What's out there that's on the cusp that you are looking forward to seeing?
So because I work in the AI agents field, so I've been always thinking about doing automation the whole time. I think it's really coming down to now we can actually use these models to do reasoning, to do dispatching, so you can combine different smaller models together in order to build things that can achieve much better in terms of performance. So that's really what I'm really excited about. I like it to think about is you can have different smaller models to be specialized at different things in different verticals with distilling of domain knowledge. So these models can be coordinated together with a more overall planning algorithms to complete tasks. And then it gives more people, so it's like what we call compositional things, right? These smaller models together can build a workflow, and these other smaller components can build other workflows. So that's what I'm really excited about, that using the minimum resources, the minimum compute, to be able to complete tasks that are compositional.
Awesome. And then Phil, what are some of the inflection points that you're looking out for in the market? Or what are things that you're bullish about, but also things that you're bearish about?
Bullish and bearish. So, the comment was made earlier, well, let me step back. Whenever you have a new platform, so I was investing when the iPhone came out. It's a magical device, a number of founders start companies, but often during that first year to 18 months, the quality is a little lower, and it's lower for two reasons. One, it takes time for founders to understand a new medium. There's no infrastructure. And so if you're building an application, you have to build both the infrastructure and the application. And so when OpenAI launched in November 22, that first wave over the first 12 to 18 months really ran into that. There were a number of companies that were started. Many of them were thin wrappers on top of OpenAI. And I think a lot of them are going to struggle. What we're starting to see now that I'm really excited about are folks that are really starting to understand the new medium, infrastructure starting to fall in place, and there's a lot of exciting opportunity out there. And so a couple of the areas we're spending time on, so vertical applications leveraging unstructured data, low-code tools are very exciting to us. We think that's a super interesting area. We're spending time on agents, but the two areas within agents that we like, we're sort of single, maybe two-turn agents. Anything above that I think is harder because the more times you go to the environment, the lower the success rate of those agents. Areas where there's a lot of data for agents, so coding, OpenDevin was founded by a CMU professor, that's pretty interesting. We think data science is an interesting area there. Within the infrastructure area, we think there's just a lot around helping large enterprises, bring on unstructured data. So we backed a couple of folks out of Snowflake who are building an unstructured data warehouse. There's a lot around security that you can do in that area. Governance is an area that's really important. You know, at the end of the day, these things hallucinate, and so you have to make sure that you're constantly checking against them. That's an interesting area. I think what's, you know, I don't know how many areas I just named, but that, you know, it's a significant shift that creates a tremendous amount of opportunity, but you just don't want to underestimate the amount of competition that's out there right now. And so the number of AI companies that have been founded over the last 18 months is just, I mean, it's hard to keep track. And so a tremendous amount of opportunity. I think you want to stick to areas where you have deep domain expertise, like anything where you know a domain and you're applying AI to it, I think is super interesting. But you want to find a complex business process where accuracy is important so you can improve on top of the model. You know, so those are the type of areas that I find interesting.
Awesome. And Joe, I think we were actually talking about some of your thoughts around like the rapid deployment of these AI technologies in enterprise scale and some of the challenges that they face. Would you like to share a little bit more about kind of what you've seen on what are some hurdles to actually tapping to the full extent of AI capabilities?
Yeah, so in big enterprises, especially for, I would say, more enterprises in financial service, healthcare areas, they have a lot of data security concerns. Then they have a lot of concerns about how to utilize, or even like started to have a version of OpenAI working with their internal ones, right? And there is a lot of concern about safeties, building agents or like conversational agents like a customer service or whatever, these kind of toolings for customer facing products. So there are a huge like sort of gap in terms of how do these companies interact with security is like a quality assurance, but at the same time they really do see the sort of advancement of the AI, they want to tap into it. So there is a huge like a sort of gap in terms of safety, controls, data security, all around it. So a lot of people are looking for like open source packages, right? But open source packages really coming down to most of them are very horizontal, and then they're very thin layer, not very built particular for a vertical. That's like sort of a huge gap. I would say, oh, this is great, allow my index or like a LangChain, but they were assumed quickly, oh, I can build a demo with them that can achieve 60%. But I need a product with 100%. I need a product that can deploy, that millions of people can use it at the same time, not just one or two people testing it. So there's a huge gap in terms of accuracy, security, and then scalabilities that are major tooling gaps for infrastructures and developer tools.
Just on that, you know, that's one of the things we're seeing, like, it's really hard to get this stuff to really work the way you want it to work to solve these problems. And so, although it may seem like there's a lot of competition in a given area, getting it right is really, really hard to do. And so, in most cases, because accuracy is important, right? And so, you know, if you're able to innovate on top of these things, you can sort of create a moat around that. But it's not easy.
I'm going to add one comment there, by the way. I think one of the most underrated things right now is just great application code and logic, right? Like, there are people trying to do so many things like nested chains and all these things where it's like, you know, you could have just wrote a couple of if statements and then a much faster and more efficient job of solving a user problem, right? We part of our product, we will summarize the script of a video, and we'll use that to pick assets from a Getty clip library. The amount of work that went into one channel, which is try to do it all through semi-agent like logic, and then the other one, which was just brute force application logic with some prompt enhancements. And I'm just gonna tell you that like the code-based version is still winning every time. That will change, right? And so we're watching for that, but don't, I would say like, you don't have to do everything in AI, right? It's okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's really about how do the domain knowledge interact with the models, right? Sometimes, like, you always want to do it a simpler way. You don't want to use the models to call it OpenAI and there's uncertainties in about what's going to come out later.
Awesome. Well, we're going to move a little bit to rapid fire, sort of rapid fire. So, what are you all hearing and seeing as the next big thing coming out?
There's this company called Parthean.
It's on the App Store.
But so to me, like, and I think the question's interesting, right? Because I think just the things like getting applications to work on top of unstructured data in the enterprise, that is probably a $300 or $400 billion global market opportunity. That's greenfield today, right? So it's not even it's like getting the stuff that we have right now to work in the enterprise to solve the problems we're talking about. It'll take decades to do that. And so like, you don't have to go beyond, just that, right? Like agents then are sort of a layer on top of that, which probably expands it by another couple $100 billion. Like it's this progression, from like the large language model to agents to robots, right? So like, it's your point about, sci-fi, right? Like we all know the possible, right? So like with agents, one of the things I see in the startup world versus the research world, like I see all of these companies that say they're going to do all these things with agents. It's not going to work, right? Like the research will tell you it's not going to work. And it's because we know the art of the possible there. Like, what a self-driving car looks like. It's taken a long ass time to get it to work, right? So I think it's like, that's where we are right now.
Yeah. I think I agree. Like it'll all happen, but it's going to take time. And I think nobody's really arguing that we're at the precipice of a really big shift in the world. I think what we're arguing about is how long this is going to last. And if you even look at the internet shift, right? That didn't happen in 2 years. That happened in 2030. It's still happening, right? We're sitting in it currently. Like we were joking about the AC, like why is that not internet connected? Like this room is still being upgraded to the last shift. And so I think I agree that like this big art of possible is going to change, and the boring shit always happens first. So the enterprise unstructured data, like that is gonna happen first before the sexy consumer gadgets and gizmos. I think that's one thing that's interesting. To talk about the future though, just to like play that sci-fi thing. I think what's interesting, the thing that I'm excited about and the way that like we think about things is speaking about these futuristic agents that consumers will work with. I'm interested to see what the relationships with these things will be like, if there will be relationships. And the way that I see it playing out is similar to, again, how relationships exist right now, where I think that there will be a general assistant, whether it's a ChatGPT or a PIN or a whatever, right? You'll have that general one, and then you'll have these specialized ones. One for software engineering if you're a software engineer, one for medical, one for financial, and we'd like to play in that realm, one for medical, right? And so looking towards those sexy futuristic things, I think thinking about what models specialize to each of these verticals will look like, and then what that big general model will look like, I think is interesting. And then in like that middle layer, I think the things that you're researching and the things that like you're working with about like what will the infrastructure look like, right? Energy is going to be a very big question mark. So is the solution going to be brute force building new nuclear reactors, or is the solution going to be smaller models, or is it going to be both? And I think that's just a really exciting thing to watch. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that to you because that sounds hard. But like that seems really exciting, right? Like I think what's interesting about the internet is that two people kind of just invented TCP/IP, and then it feels like it all kind of happened, but that's not the case. There was a lot of competition. HTML wasn't supposed to be the winner, but it became the winner, right? And so I think we're seeing a lot of those things play out right now, and it's cool to just watch and let it take time.
Could have been Gopher.
Could have been Gopher.
I like where you guys are taking that. I'll take a couple different spins. I'd say in the near term, we're going to see the rise of at least limited agents that can do practical things for people. I think we're about to see we're going to move out of the backlash cycle around generative media and back into a productive cycle of it, I hunch. next year we'll see a lot of generative video stuff. Most of it will be a complete waste of time. What I do think we'll see interesting, one of my sort of out there predictions, I think hallucinations will come to an end. I think we're going to see some of that. Yeah, I've seen and heard from some startups that really nailed some ways to approach it that haven't been thought of traditionally before. So I think someone will make a breakthrough there. It just sort of feels like a has to happen kind of thing. And then I think in the next year, the AI of everything. Everything you use on a regular basis, be it TripAdvisor, be it Yelp, be it Sudoku, will have an AI thing about it, whether it's a chat interface, whatever it's going to be. All the things it'll just be there. Where I think I'm most different on some of these models is I really question is who are the players in this next space, right? Is, just to use an analogy, is OpenAI the Friendster, MySpace, Facebook, or maybe Bebo, of AI, right? I don't know how to answer that question. And that to me is the thing that actually I'm if there was like the Sopranos of this, I'd be enjoying watching that show. Like I'm very curious to see like what happens when Bedrock is just as capable as OpenAI, which is right around the corner. GCP is right around the corner. Like all of these things are happening. It's going to be a fun and interesting year, I'll say that much.
Can I respond to that
No.
last point really quickly? Unless you had a thought on that? Okay, so basically I think a lot about this because it ties into how the government is investing in things and it's really interesting. So basically like the internet
They're
was
going to get it right.
right. No,
Yeah.
so this is my point actually. Like the internet was invented early on, was funded by the government essentially, right? And that's how technology shifts happened up until recent was government has the most capital to deploy, and so they would basically invest in these really big platform shifts, and that's how things like the internet have come to fruition. They've built the infrastructure for things like telephone poles, for things like the internet, and we were able to build on top of that as entrepreneurs. That investment in things like AI stopped, and you hear Sam Altman and other people talk about how they brought this to the government and they wouldn't invest in it or whatever, but for some reason the government missed this shift. And so that infrastructure, like the actual telephone poles, the actual internet, is not being created by the government, it's being created by private industry. And this is like a new thing. This has not happened in recent memory. And so I think it's almost like, is it going to be the internet created by the government, or is it going to, I see it as like a different comparison. I think we can compare ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude to the Facebook Friendster stuff, but I find it interesting that we're building on top of this layer of infrastructure that is being built by our competitors as well. And that's really new and weird.
But I think we've seen that before. That's why I counterpoint that. I think that was what happened with sort of the social mobile web, right?
Mm.
Everything about the social mobile web happened through private industry, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, other than opening up spectrums.
Yeah. I guess at least the thing I think about as it relates to this question of infrastructure is sort of to build like core models, right? What are the constraints? And I see basically two. GPUs, which are very expensive, and I know in the research world it's hard to get access, right? Like it's that and it's talent, right? And I'd say there's only, I don't know, at that level, the model level is thousands that matter. And those thousands that matter, 600 or 800 work for OpenAI. I'd say probably 500 work for Google. And then Anthropic has probably a couple hundred, and then the rest are spread. And so I think it's going to be very difficult to dislodge those core model companies based solely on that, right? Because it's just so hard to get access to compute and talent, right? And so, and I quite frankly worry about the research side because it's really hard to get access to compute, And so I know there's been a number of different initiatives that are trying to help that, and quite frankly, a lot of the companies are partnering. But those are the limiting factors at the model layer,
And it's like the end to open research
Um,
in these really big models.
Very heavy transition.
Yeah, so for me, like in terms of my research world, what we do is we collaborate with other large companies for the cluster's sake.
Right.
I work with Amazon, I work with Salesforce, right? So it's actually interesting that how we split the work. They have the engineers to do the dirty data cleanings and data curations. And then me and my PhD come in for the modeling part. And then they have engineers who scale up and run codings, and then we do analysis. So it's a more collaborations. Like we have the talent, we have the more long forward thinking, or they have the infrastructure, data, and the GPUs in some way. So this is one way we do collaborations. But at the same time, within the universities, we could do smaller models, which is a way that we can sort of still be able to reach certain performances within certain verticals and tasks. So it's definitely a limit in terms of how much computational resource that we have. And the government, like for example, right now, like the New York State is wanting to start with an initiative called Empire AI that is buying a lot of GPUs. But it's a process. The government is slow, so we all know the government is very slow. It's probably going to take us a year, another 2 years to be able to get the resource from the academia will. Yeah, I agree. And to be able to have the talent to be able to really do transformative work in the large language model area is very limited. Everybody is competing for my PhD.
That's it. That is
I have
the
a
limiting
student.
factor.
I have a student in just like third year, so we have really impactful papers, and Anthropic just approached him. And then he wants to go work for them while doing ABD. So it's like a competition from the academia and also for these big companies.
By the way, this is why we didn't build LLMs. I didn't have the confidence in my history of what I've done in the past. I don't have a huge network of these hardcore AI researchers and developers. So I didn't believe that I would, to Phil's point of like, is that the world-class guy? I'm not a world-class AI LLM researcher person, right? That's
Yeah.
not where I've spent my time. So again, as that translates to all of you, is think about like, if you want to go play in that deep space, can you go find those people? Can you beat Anthropic, right?
yeah.
Can you, right? Because the answer is like, well, how would I do that? The answer is no.
I think the answer is no. I think if someone's thinking about starting a company competing with them on their core models, I can't think of a single person in the world that would succeed in that right now. I think right?
No, I think that's right. I think
So
going
good
to
decision.
building like basically what you're trying to do is be orthogonal to that, right?
Yes.
Like, so the models are going to continue to improve. What can you do that's orthogonal where you get the benefit of the core model improvement, but you're doing something that they wouldn't go into.
Yeah.
And so like building smaller, more efficient models focused on different domains, that's super interesting at the infrastructure layer, number security again, and other things like that.
What about like explainability? Like, is that being done in academia or is that being done at the companies? Because I know that there's all this safety arguments and stuff like that. What does that look like?
I also work on explainability,
Okay.
which is very important in terms of, for example, counterfactual. It's like,
Right.
what if you do the other ways, right? Explain how the model thinks. A lot of that is done in academia, but also in research, in companies in the research work.
And what's
So-
the limiting factor on that research? Still GPUs?
Again, like do you want to do explanations on larger models or smaller models? Right? A computation is always a cost. So for example, Anthropic has done a lot of explainability. So I have a student that works on this, and then he basically, it's our third year who wants to go to Anthropic and do the explainability on the larger models, right?
That's weird.
So it's a really strong draw. It's a sort of a lot of these companies are stopped publishing. So
Yeah.
if you wanted to know what's going on, you have to join them.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting game that they're playing.
So you as the investigator, you're almost disincentivized from collaborating with them, right? Because if you collaborate with them, sure, you get some compute. It's like a short-term burst of what you need, but then you could lose your talent. Is that right?
So it's really, so as a advisor of these students. We really wanted, our product is the talent, right? We really
Yeah.
wanted to see him be successful. And joining a company actually making impact is also a form of success.
But between us friends.
Yeah, it's really coming down to who you work with, right? So we only work with research organizations, are supportive of publication and open source.
I appreciate the kind of organic back and forth.
Yeah, can I hijack one more time?
Briefly.
Briefly, just building on something Phil said, to quote the Wayne Gretzky, skate where the puck's going, right? So if you're doing stuff with, for example, generative images, and you're like, oh, we're gonna go build this whole custom thing because generative text doesn't really work well. First of all, it sort of already does, and second of all, if it doesn't today, it will like tomorrow, right? So don't assume that the current limitations of any of these platforms will be here for very long at all. They will not be, right? Everybody is working to improve those things, right? So if you need, using the same example, generative text on screen to be perfect, it will be, right? Just you better not have that in your product today because it's not now. But if that's where you're trying to get to, it'll be there for you when you're ready. That was it.
So I'd love to actually one or two questions from the audience before we kind of I do one final wrap-up question. So actually, if you press the black button in front of you, just hold it and you can speak.
Okay. All right. So I took some notes because you guys said something super interesting earlier on about
What? Yeah.
about
Yeah, I hope it was.
yeah, no, it was interesting. So you were talking about how everything will AI will be added to everything, and I've kind of wrestled with this question about whether the fundamental belief is whether people will believe in AGI or they don't, and that will essentially determine the motive and the decisions they make. So you just mentioned Wayne Gretzky about skating to where the puck is, but it's more about if you believe in the AGI, where the puck will go, where it'll go around, and you're trying to go there rather than following the crowd. So I think the question that I have is more on like this socio-cultural zeitgeist of necessity. So you guys were talking earlier on about like making jokes about the hardware, about whether Apple will make something. So will there be a shift in the consumer psychology of what people need in something? So right now the needs have shifted, and it isn't based on just, oh, we think Maslow's hierarchy is standard. It's changed because people will pay more for political beliefs, for brands that they believe in, and it won't be this free market race to the bottom, I'll do something better than someone else. So if that consumer psychology shifts, won't it then impact the dollars and the flow of capital, which then impacts the decisions that the executives and founders are making to change the technology that we're moving to?
Question. I think you have to start with sort of your premise of consumers and shifting behaviors, right? I think there's a certain amount of like the tail wagging the dog and vice versa, right? Like nobody here would have said, hey, you know what we should all do? Just take pictures of random food and share them with other people and hope that other people like express that through emoji. Right? Like that would not have been a thing anyone would have said is going to become a mainstay pattern in society. And yet it is possibly a definitive action of most of Western society, right? So I've tended to be a person who believes that humans only we shift, but we fundamentally do, like the Maslow thing is pretty real, right? One of my mentors has this statement, which is that humans have been put on this planet to be entertained. He has a few other principles that I like very much. That one obviously is relevant to what I do for a living. I believe that statement will remain true no matter what all of these things are, but all of these things will be adapted and used to that purpose, right? Like that's sort of how I look at the world, is that humans want to do basic things. We don't want to be bored, right? We want to be entertained. Try not to doom scroll y'all, but we do our things to keep the mind going. So how does AI and AGI and et cetera play into all that? I think that part you can almost bank on. The question mark to me becomes what's the next people taking pictures of food and sharing them with strangers, right? Like that's the part that I have a hard time being like, oh, this thing might happen. So I don't know if that directly answers, but that's how I would think about that.
Yeah, I have a couple things to say, and I hope they answer your question. But the first thing is that I agree, and I'll even take what you took I'll take what you said a step further. I do not think that people and their behaviors change at all. I think that we are the same beings that we've been for thousands of years. I think everything else around us changes, and the way that we respond to those are
It's very deep.
are like with the time. So for example, right? Right now, I think a lot of people are saying, like, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your point was on the latter thing that you said is like, right now people are willing to pay more money for things that align with their brand and their politics, and that is a change in economics. But I would argue that that's, go ahead.
No, yeah, so I think the big part of it is that it's speculative. So there's a difference between chasing after something and then going more the speculative route of like what the next technologies will be, going from AI to AGI to, let's say, neural interface devices. That is the shift. So you were talking about like hype with crypto, right? But there's also just radical bull and bear markets and cycles like that have changed in different industries. So whether people have changed or not, I think that's very debatable, because I do think people have drastically changed, and I think it's very cultural dependent and geographical on how those people have changed.
Yeah, I'll say what I'm thinking, and then hopefully it answers your question, or like is relevant at all. But like basically about the politics or about the branding, I think back in the day when you had $1, you basically had like 6 places to spend it, and they were just like places in your village. And if there were 2 bakeries, you'd go to the bakery that you just enjoyed more, and that was probably because you liked the baker. Why did you like the baker? Probably because you enjoyed some of the similar things. That's the same thing as buying something from somewhere that is aligned with your political views or with your brand or something, right? Just on a different scale in a new age. So in that way, I think that people have not changed, but the world has changed because we have a million places to spend, we have a million different places to read the news, and so we're gonna go to the place that aligns with us the most, as we did with the 2 bakeries, right? I think AGI I have a problem with, just like as a 3-letter acronym, just because you and I are thinking of 2 completely different things when you say AGI. If you mean super intelligence, I think that's really far away and actually quite dangerous. And I'm not like an AI doomer, but like true super intelligence should probably be pretty scary to people. AGI, in the way that we used to define it, which is just like an AI system that can be equivalent to the average human in every sector, that I'm on board, and like that makes sense. When we're gonna get there, probably pretty soon. I totally lost track of what I was saying.
Okay.
I'm gonna just stop.
Phil, you had something?
Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in a little bit.
Yeah,
So, I do think consumer behavior change is based on shifts in technology, and what I often try to do is look at kids. Because what you often find is that kids grow up around these things natively, and if you look at their user behavior, you can often see trends in the way we'll all do it over time. And I think you're starting to see that with, generative AI, right? Like the way, I was talking to a founder who has a kid, and he was in this meeting, and he, the kid wanted to save something on his dad's thing, and he started talking to it. And it's like, it didn't do anything. Like, it's like the kid who 6 years ago started touching your screen to move things around. Like, I do think consumer behavior will change based on this technology, and when it does change, I think you're right, it will lead to a potential reordering of consumer goods, right? I think it happens every time you have a new technology innovation, and it'll happen this time. I think it'll be enhanced by agents over time, and again, I think the agent behavior I'm talking about, like a web agent, will take some time because of things intimately. But once you do, then choice moves from the person to the agent, right? And so you're seeing it now with code. So if you look at code completion, let's say you have a co-pilot that completes code and it pulls from a library. You didn't make the decision to pull from that library. The code completion application did. That's changing distribution for that application, right? And so like you're going to start to see agents who are making decisions on behalf of people, and that's going to lead to a whole new consumer behavior as well. And so I do think things will reorder. I do think you can start to look at kids and the way they use these technologies as a window into what it will look like 5 years from now. And I do think agents will enhance that.
Joe, do you want to also chime in or?
I generally agree that with the new technology, there will be opening up new potential possible goods that people would start to appreciate more. Especially kids that grow up in a native like AI environment, there will be probably, so one of the things I really do see there is gonna have a huge shift is on entertainment games, right? So it will be a much more fun game to play, but it's just but still like a more interactive game, more immersive games or this, but still like it's the same idea about people who like the game would like pick these games. But one of the fundamental needs it wouldn't change, but there will be more like, oh, it's easier to play. Even the older generations would be able to enjoy this game. Maybe there will be like a good certain, like a later on, because of the natural interaction, it's easier for certain special subgroups to be able to enjoy them more. So I think that could be it, because AI is really what we call natural interaction. For example, in natural language or in speech, you can play with the video games or so on. So then, like, it might change the behavior of consumers.
Thank you. One more question from the audience. Okay.
Jeremy, you said that none of you have AI companies. You have product companies that utilize AI. So going forward, for founders that are trying to start a company, especially with how AI is going to become more and more prevalent in the future, when they have an idea, do you think it's better to identify the problem that can be solved by the AI, therefore focus the idea on the AI, or do you think it's better to find the problem that can be solved in general and then attach AI to it? How?
The latter, hands down. I think my perspective, again, just one guy, is that I think AI is I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. AI is inherently commoditized. So, right, if we think about what it fundamentally is doing right now, it's the fundamental leveler, right? Everything's now at average, right? So, if your problem didn't exist, well, no, if your problem didn't exist before it doesn't mean it's not a problem. It's actually very viable, right? It's more a matter of, I would just look at what is the problem you're trying to solve and how does AI help you with that? If it helps you code faster, cool. If it helps you build a better interface, great. If it helps you with all things, even better, right? But I don't think if that problem is only well, you can't AI this, I don't think it's a problem. Is I guess the one little caveat I make.
Okay, great. So I want all four of our panelists to give us a 5-word takeaway for today's discussion. 5 words, 5 words. Very brief, 5 words.
Build great products, startups hard.
Let's all go with that.
All right,
Yeah,
+1.
anyone else?
plus
That's
one,
only 2 words.
plus one also.
Yeah.
On the App Store.
Oh yeah, download Parthean.
Yeah.
Joe, what about you?
Yes.
5-word takeaway.
5-word takeaway.
This feels like a ChatGPT prompt.
Focus on the
Talk about
real
whole
pain.
thing, summarizing.
Focus
Sorry,
on
what was
the
that again?
Focus on the real pain.
Nice.
Phil, still want to go +1 or?
Wow, that was
Yeah,
really
I'll
good.
go with +1. No, I agree with everything that you said.
Okay, great. I guess for me it's Carnegie Mellon tartans breeds winners. So I'll end that. Last question. If people want to follow up with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
For me, the best way is LinkedIn. So Phil Bronner on LinkedIn. I do respond to those messages, and so best way for me.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Twitter, email, carrier pigeon here. I'm online, so anywhere.
Email, not Twitter, never Twitter, and LinkedIn. But one thing, if you're going to find me on LinkedIn, please send me a message. Don't just send me a connection request. All right? I need to know that I've talked to you. Otherwise, we're not connected. Personal. Well, let's have a little chat. If you're the guy I had a Munchkin donut with in the hall after the event, I know who you are.
Munchkin donuts.
Exactly.
Have you had
That was
some?
Kate. No, you brought it in.
We gotta get some munchkins. Are there any munchkins left?
Oh, yes.
Probably.
No.
Wait, Joe, have them.
Joe, yeah.
Joe.
What's the best way to get in touch with you, Joe?
Emails is always the best way. And then LinkedIn, also the same, like you write something, I don't really do a lot of connection requests to.
Okay, great. Well, love a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you again. I think we're good. So we'll probably be here for another 15 minutes, and then we'll probably have to exit the space. If you need to use the restrooms, women's are this side, men's are that side. But thank you again. Thanks for coming here. Please get in touch with our panelists, get in touch with CMU T&E, and let's keep going. Let's build something together.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
it's really great.